刘培元的英文教室经典演说篇第112集，我们的回顾经典演说篇，我们当时20到25集。这个经典演说，麦克阿瑟的告别演说，老兵不死，只有凋零，大部分人都听过，但是中文可能有些人看过，英文看过原文的大概就很少了要完全看得懂的更是少之又少。我们前面在20到25集里面已经把他的翻译口头上的讲出来，还有他的当时时代背景、弦外之音都讲出来。那我们这个回顾我们分2集回顾如果你前面没看过的话这边可能看不懂，你就回去看一下20到25集，用6集把它讲完。这边呢就是一个句子红色，一个句子蓝色，这样比较好分绿色字就是动词，动词是句子灵魂这样子标出来就比较好解读所以你可以当做听力练习或直接看，一面看字一面听也可以。如果你程度还不错的话，或者意思都了解，你也可以不要看字直接听去做别的事情，或者躺在旁边眼睛闭起来听一下。那听我讲的时候，约着我自己讲所以就是听一下因为我速度用偏慢一点稍微偏慢一点，然后呢就是听我的抑扬顿挫，还有这个中间起承转合，有些地方它必须要慢一点，不是说一个句子跟一个句子的时候中间要慢一点，一个句子因为它里面有很多句子很长长的句子都要停顿一下好，我们来念一下，分2集。这个上集我们先念一下它是 Farewell Address to Congress. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, and distinguished members of the Congress. I stand on this rostrum with a sense of deep humility and a great pride. Humility in the wake of those great American architects of our history who have stood here before me.Pride in the reflection that this foreign or legislative debate represents human liberty in the purest form yet devised. Here are centered the hopes and aspirations and faith of the entire human race. I do not stand here as advocate for any partisan cause.For the issues are fundamental and reach quite beyond the realm of partisan consideration. They must be resolved on the highest plane of national interest if our course is to prove sound and our future protected. I trust, therefore, that you will do me the justice of receiving that which I have to say as solely expressing the considered viewpoint of the fellow American.I'll address you with neither rancor nor bitterness in the fading twilight of life, with but one purpose in mind, to serve my country. The issues are global and so interlocked that to consider the problems of one sector, oblivious to those of another, is but a core disaster for the whole.While Asia is commonly referred to as the gateway to Europe, it is no less true that Europe is the gateway to Asia, and the broad influence of the one cannot fail to have its impact upon the other. There are those who claim our strength is inadequate to protect on both fronts, that we cannot divide our effort.I can't think of no greater expression of defeatism. If a potential enemy can divide the strength of two fronts, it is for us to counter his effort. The communist threat is a global one. Its successful advance in one sector threatens the destruction of every other sector.You cannot appease or otherwise surrender to communism in Asia without simultaneously undermining our efforts to halt its advance in Europe. Beyond pointing out these general truisms, I shall confine my discussion to the general areas of Asia. Before one may objectively assess the situation now existing there, He must comprehend something Asia's past and the revolutionary changes which have marked her course up to the present. Long exploited by the so-called colonial powers, with little opportunity to achieve any degree of social justice, individual dignity, or the higher standard of life such as guided our own noble administration in the Philippines. The peoples of Asia found the opportunity in the war just past to throw off the shackles of colonialism, and now see the dawn of new opportunity, a heretofore unfelt dignity and the self-respect of political freedom. Mustering half of the Earth's population and 60% of its natural resources, this people are rapidly consolidating a new force, both moral and material, with which to raise the living standard and direct adaptations of design to modern progress to their own distinct cultural environments. Whether one adheres to the concept of colonialism or not, this is the direction of Asian progress, and it may not be stopped. It is a corollary to the shift of the world economic frontiers as the whole epicenter of world affairs rotates back toward the area whence it started. In this situation, it becomes vital that our country orient its policies in consonance with its basic evolutionary condition rather than pursue the course behind applied to the reality that the colonial era is now past and the Asian peoples covet the right to shape their own free destiny. Let us seek now is friendly guidance, understanding, and support, not imperious direction, the dignity of equality, and not the shame of subjugation. Their pre-war standard of life, pitifully low, is infinitely lower now in the devastation left in war's wake. World ideologies play a little part in Asian thinking and are little understood. What the people strive for is the opportunity for a little more food in their stomachs, a little better clothing on their backs, a little firmer roof over their heads, and the realization of the normal nationalist urge for political freedom. These political social conditions have but an indirect bearing upon our own national security, but to form a backdrop to contemporary planning which must be thoughtfully considered if we are to avoid the pitfalls of unrealism. Of more direct and immediate bearing upon our national security are the changes wrought in the strategic potential of the Pacific Ocean in the course of the past war. Prior thereto, the western strategic frontier of the United States lay on the lateral line of the Americas, with an exposed island salient extending out through Hawaii, Midway, and Guam to the Philippines. The salient proved not an outpost of strength, but an avenue of weakness along which the enemy could and did attack. The Pacific was a potential area of defense for any predatory force intent upon striking at the bordering island areas. All this was changed by our Pacific victory. Our strategic frontier then shifted to embrace the entire Pacific Ocean, which became a vast moat to protect us as long as we held it. Indeed, it acts as a protective shield for all of the Americas and all three islands at the Pacific Ocean area. We controlled it to the shores of Asia by a chain of islands extending in an arc from the Aleutians to the Marianas, held by us and our three allies. Founders Island chant we can dominate with sea and air power. Every Asiatic port from Vladivostok to Singapore with sea and air power. Every port, as I said, from Vladivostok to Singapore and prevent any hostile movement into the Pacific. Any predatory attack from Asia must be an amphibious effort. No amphibious force can be successful without control of sea lands and air over those lands in its avenue of advance. With naval and air supremacy and modest ground elements to defend bases, any major attack from continental Asia toward us without France in the Pacific would be doomed to failure. Under such conditions, the Pacific no longer represents menacing avenues of approach for a prospective invader. It assumes instead the friendly aspect of peaceful lake. All line of defense is a natural one and can be maintained with a minimum of military effort and expense. It envisions no attack against anyone, nor does it provide the bastions essential for offensive operations, but properly maintained would be an invincible defense against aggression. The holding of this lateral defense line in the Western Pacific is entirely dependent upon holding on segments thereof. For any major breadth of that line by an unfriendly power will render vulnerable to determining attack every other major segment. This is a military estimate, as to which I have yet to find a military leader who would take exception. For that reason, I have strongly recommended in the past, as a matter of military urgency, that under no circumstances must the Formosa fall under communist control. Such an eventuality would at once threaten the freedom of the Philippines and the loss of Japan, and might well force our western frontier back to the coast of California, Oregon, and Washington. 好，这分两段啊，上段讲到啊，念到这边啊，就是我发音当然很烂啊，但是至少有研究过啊，有些字该怎么发音啊，稍微有点心得啊，就是还是可以有资格了，让你参考一下啊。那我目前有15个 YouTube 频道，还是15个，不是只有一个，所以拜托大家啊，如果你觉得不好，你就什么都不要做，也不要订阅；如果你觉得还不错，那就麻烦你15个订阅都按一下。好，这一集讲到这里。